Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, August 26th, 2020. Time for yet another show, and another show we will have. It's all arranged. It's all been locked in. There's nothing we can do. We can't turn around and head in the other direction now. It won't help us anyway. There's nowhere to hide. Much to round up today, of course. Daily Coast Radio now being live. Thanks to Bill in Portland, Maine, for reminding us that we are, in fact, doing a show. Kagro X, me, David Waldman, and our own Dem from Connecticut, Greg Dworkin. Recap the convention. Uh-oh. I didn't watch it. I hope Greg did, and he'll recap the convention. And if you did, feel free to recap it for us. Let us know what happened. I don't know. That I couldn't bring myself to watch. But what the hell? Why don't we take on the assignment of recapping the convention? I think we can do it. And do other stuff I can't tell you about because let's just wait and see what happens, damn it, people. That's true. And let me remind you that before our president responded to every possible situation was, we'll see what happens, which is always, never really ceased to, always and never, both, ceased to amaze me in terms of a dodge, that you could stand there as president and say, events will unfold and we'll see what happens during them. And that's really all you need to know from me. You're a president, the leader of this country. It's always been kind of astonishing that people would accept that as an answer. Anyway, but even before that happened, we were always reminded by Greg in his polling roundups, these are just a snapshot in time. And guess what? We'll have to wait and see what happens, but it sounded so much smarter when he said it, and of course it was actually true. These were things that the event we were talking about was the election, and it hadn't happened yet, and we were supposed to wait to see what happened, as opposed to what are your plans for the next week? We'll see what happens. Now, that's not a good answer. All right. Much to round up. There was, of course, night 2. It feels like 300, but 2. Night 2 of the Republican National Convention, and it was, I'm sure, horrific. I did not watch it, as you will recall from yesterday's show. It was my birthday, and I didn't feel like that was a good way to spend my birthday, and I had plenty of good things to do. It was very nice, and I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. I hope, well, in particular, that Armando did, because it was his birthday too. Today, it is happy birthday to Scott Anderson, who nonetheless has got to work like a dog for his birthday in helping us summarize today's show. I suppose we should have picked Wednesday as a move-in day and bring our son down, and then we would be off today, and then we would have let him have the day off. Although, of course, I could have used the day off yesterday and done that. I don't know if move-in was available. Anyway, it really doesn't matter. There are so many other larger items to get to in today's news. I didn't watch, but yesterday was the night that Melania Trump broke the First Lady break the Hatch Act? Everybody broke the Hatch Act. King jumps queen. Everybody jumps queen. You remember, maybe you don't, from the History of the World, Part 1. Anyway, yesterday was Hatch Act violation night at the White House. They're all Hatch Act violation nights, of course, for the White House, and Hatch Act violation whites as well. That's true. Not just a slip of the tongue. Let's see. Yesterday, Eric Trump gave his speech. Melania Trump gave her speech. Tiffany Trump gave her speech. Who knows what the hell they had to say about those things? I don't know. I think there was something somebody observed about Eric Trump's speech being ridiculous in some particular way. And maybe we'll recall what that is. But anyway, Melania gave hers from the newly renovated, they say, Rose Garden. I think I saw the comment on it asking why she was giving her speech from the courtyard of an Embassy Suites, which I guess, I don't know what to tell you. There are differing opinions about the value of her redesign of the garden. And really, that's not a big thing to care about. Things that we would include in the columns to care about, in addition to rounding up all of our convention news and Hatch Act violations, and the fact that, one, nobody's got anything in mind that they could do about the Hatch Act violation, because we gave up on that a long time ago. You'll recall that the government ethics folks found that, for instance, Kellyanne Conway had knowingly and willfully violated the Hatch Act some years ago, and everybody kind of laughed at that. Well, we didn't, but they did inside the White House, and said, we're just not going to be prosecuting for that. So I guess that lesson was well learned. And in addition to having all the speeches from the White House grounds, which is a violation of the Hatch Act, there was a naturalization ceremony that they apparently used for visual effect during the convention, including uniformed military on the premises for that. And you recall that's not supposed to happen. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Kenosha, Wisconsin, unrest continues following the latest in the long line of unjustified shootings of black people by police. And, we didn't follow that in close detail, but we wanted to at least put it on the record. But by the time we get back around to it, things have escalated, and more people have been shot overnight by what appeared to be right-wing reactionaries, Boogaloo Boy types, Proud Boy types, who, to all appearances, work in concert with the police and are roaming the streets as vigilantes, inciting violence and shooting people. And now we all do the thing where we scratch our heads and wonder how long it'll take the police to come around and arrest that guy. And we wait to see. And good point, right? As people who have been calling for police reform or even defunding the police for a long time. Just a reminder, if you defund the cops, as Philip Anderson puts it here, who will you call when there's a madman with a gun? And the answer is, the madman with the gun is a friend of the police. So call anyone you like. It won't matter. They're going to shoot you regardless. Keep that in mind. Upbeat message for the morning. How are you, Greg?
Well, I'm fine.
Yeah,
It gets better, of course, because if you defund the police, then you're going to replace them with private security guards.
Yes.
Which, are you going to feel better about that? And who are these people?
Right.
The Eric Prince.
They are maybe they're the guys that just shot the people in Kenosha last night.
Right. Let's just say, as things unfold in Kenosha that we're not aware of yet, that it is not an automatic thing that this therefore benefits Republicans.
Okay.
It's convention week, and so stuff like that somehow or other. Oh, a guy got shot. Oh, he's dead. Yes. Well, the real question is, does it benefit Trump?
Yes. Of course.
175, 180,000 people are dead. But does it benefit Trump?
Right. Oh, yes.
Everything isn't about whether or not it benefits Republicans or Trump, but because this convention speech and because conservatives have been getting pounded for 3.5 years, they're eager, especially the pundit conservative pundit types, are eager to be out there saying, this changes everything. This turns everything around. And, of course, that's all tied in with the convention. Let's do the convention first. So on night one of the convention was inclusion night. Right? Yes. So let's have my black friend get up and say that Trump is really not a racist. And let's get my immigrant friend to say Trump really doesn't dislike immigrants.
That would be nice. And,
as Jay Rosen put it, not a pundit, what I heard as a voter, Trump has a lot of black friends. He's fine where we are on coronavirus. Biden is Che Guevara. Democrats would cancel the suburbs. Americans own all the businesses, nobody's employees. And Trump's son met his dad a few times and was really impressed.
Yes, that's nice of him to let us know.
So that was night one. Where Donald Trump Jr. really didn't look well at all.
No.
But you had, the occasional speech that people said, that's okay, like Tim Scott.
Yeah, right. That was sort of normal-ish.
But keep this in mind as you look at the bigger picture. And then last night was also a series of jarring, discoordinated messages one of the prime speakers.
Weird.
The Protocols of the Elder of Zion lady was pulled and wasn't allowed to speak after it was discovered that she was tweeting that stuff around.
Yeah.
But the one who says that each household should get one vote, and when in doubt, let your husband decide, that lady got to speak.
Yeah, that seemed like an important speech. Although I was wondering why her husband wasn't speaking.
And then we had I have 2 kids. And, the brown one always gets treated differently, and that's okay.
Is another lady? There's a different one? Oh, my God.
Different lady. And then, of course, we had Melania Trump in her military uniform saying, I don't care, do you? And, of course, the reporters were gushing about how soft she was and how it would normalize Trump's secret weapon, yada, yada, yada.
Wow.
And none of it makes any sense when you watch it. None of it. And by the way, people weren't watching. Monday night got the lowest record in recent history of any convention, at least by Nielsen, lower than the previous record set the week before by one of the days of the Democratic convention. The look at it in terms of a coherent whole, which is what the Democrats did, misses the point of what the Republicans are doing. Some very smart Twitter analysts said, look, they're doing is individual speeches with individual sound bites. They don't care whether or not you think it makes sense. They take the individual sound bites of a speech, like the lady who said that households should vote in a godly manner where the husband decides and they all get a single vote. And they take those individual sound bites and they target specific people on Facebook with them. And that's what this convention is for. It's to produce those things. It's got nothing to do with what you're watching on TV. You don't count. They're not aiming at you.
Oh, all right. Well, I mean, I guess. Well,
and when you look at it that way, it's completely different. Hatch Act, Schmatch Act. They don't care. Now, it's infuriating. And there were some sound bites there which were just downright insulting. Probably the 2 biggest steam out of your ears things that I saw last night wasn't Melania's speech. She's first lady. She's allowed to speak. Fine, whatever.
Yeah.
It was Mike Pompeo speaking as Secretary of State where he shouldn't be speaking at all, and speaking from overseas where he shouldn't be speaking at all.
All right.
That's number one. And number 2 is having a propaganda naturalization ceremony, completely incongruent to the rest of the evening. And in light of Trump's record on immigration, ridiculous.
Yes.
But again, it's meant to be a propaganda soundbite. Now, my center-right friends keep texting and keep tweeting, don't underestimate the power of the propaganda when the state... Yeah, we get it. We understand that. The question is, are you just talking to the 40% you always talk to, or is this going to convince anybody else? And you've only got 2 months to do it. So let me just try to put this in perspective. John Harwood tweeted about the first night. GOP strategist LP Donovan on the RNC Open. It's effective if the goal is firing up 40-odd% already inclined to vote for Trump, but pushing the buttons risks squandering rare opportunities before a national audience. Didn't seem much designed to grow a coalition and elicit a second look from skeptics. And he went on to say, if it goes perfectly, they can shave a 9-point lead to a 6 or 7-point lead. That doesn't win. Okay. Then night 2, the headlines the RNC was hoping for, this is taken Goddard, RNC speaker boosts conspiracy theory of Jewish plot. RNC speaker supports barring women from voting. So we talked about those 2 things. And then look, we've been doing this for 40 years. Let me give you an idea what's going on here. Pundits, right? You got Norm Ornstein. The big story tonight from the convention was in-your-face illegality. Pundits who talked about the optics of the convention, whether it went off well and didn't, first and foremost, talk about the unprecedented breach of law and decency committed journalistic malpractice. And Exhibit A and B are the Washington Post and New York Times. If you go to the front page of the Washington Post, Trump uses tools of government in re-election effort. First Lady's Rose Garden speech, Pompeo's address, naturalization ceremony raise issues of separation of politics and official business. In other words, it's bad and they shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
And then the speeches take aim at Biden, highlight Trump's ties to evangelicals. And later on, way down, is Melania Trump's leads GOP's appeal to women. Whereas at first, the Times led with GOP appeals to women, as if all that other stuff didn't happen.
Okay.
And then they got yelled at, and they took those headlines down, and now they have a story in their front page. At RNC, Trump uses tools of presidency and aim to broaden appeal. That's the main story.
Yeah.
Epic shamelessness of the Republican convention, naturalization ceremony at odds with Trump's stance on immigration, and then later on, Melania Trump's unique role expressing sympathy on the virus. She actually said, "Gee, I'm sorry everybody died. Nobody else has, nobody else will," at that convention. So you have an idea what's going on. And again, it's all disjointed. It doesn't really fit together. It doesn't matter to them because that's not what they're looking for. But the media's attempt at normalizing all of this by either ignoring it or saying, "Oh, this is the kind of thing," and there's plenty of examples of this. This is the kind of thing that's really going to sway center-right voters, especially women, said without really understanding anything. You don't know that. Maybe it will, maybe it won't.
Yeah. Well,
the polls will tighten. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. There's going to be a bounce. Maybe, maybe not. Kenosha will help Trump. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, it's just like reflex. They all say, yeah, well, 2016. Feels like 2016. Maybe, maybe not. Here are the more objective people.
It's good news for John McCain.
We got about maybe 15% of voters watching this stuff, most of whom are hardcore partisans in one of the most stable races ever. And little sign the horse race significantly moved after the DNC. The idea that any of the DNC-RNC activities will move voters is untested. Stu Rothenberg. Like Norm Ornstein, I've been doing this for only 40 years, but I would wait for the polls to be sure what suburban women think. And yeah, Trump will likely be unscripted over the next 2 months, giving Democrats plenty of chances to win those voters. That's in response to New York Times reporter Alania Plott. I've interviewed a whole lot of suburban center-right women who have been on the fence about voting for Trump. The First Lady's speech is going to stick.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? One thing that has struck me in these interviews that she's done is that they're often looking for a reason to reelect Trump, yada, yada, yada. So basically, if you go and look at the female equivalent of the West Virginia diner wanting to vote for Trump, you can find it. Amy Walter, a little bit more objective. Conventions are kind of like the Major League Baseball All-Star game. There's a game, there's a score, but it doesn't figure into the standings. What happens in the next 69 days will matter a lot more than anything Dunn said these last 2 weeks. And G. Elliott Morris, convention bounces have gotten smaller over time as polarization has increased. They are even smaller when incumbents are running. They're smaller still when polls are stable prior to the convention, indicating most people have made up their minds already. Yeah. All bad news for Trump. And, the other bad news is that there really aren't that many undecided voters. There may be 10% in play. And again, I've been a big fan of the undecided voter. Again, not because people change their mind, but because folks come in and out of the electorate. The people who didn't vote in 2016 have been the focus of the 2020 Democratic convention. And Melania made one of the very few appeals to them in the Republican convention. And, of course, Axios has your how Trump can still win. Trump's big bet is there are a lot of working-class voters, especially in rural areas, who didn't vote in 2016 but will this time. But there's a lot of 2016 voters who were Democrats who didn't vote, who will vote this time. We know that in terms of looking at Pennsylvania and North Carolina requests for ballots, which are way up compared to 2016. Sure, some of it is going to be shifting from election day to vote by mail, especially by Democrats. The Democrats have an overwhelming lead in asking for ballots in those states. But the idea that there are only Trump voters, and only Trump voters are the ones who are going to be energized, and only Trump voters are the ones who didn't vote in 2016 but are going to vote in 2020, is a constant harangue from media.
True.
Because nobody seems to be able to get over the fact that 2016 was so screwed up based on Comey and the Russians. Right. And rather than deal with that, it's much easier to find those guys in the diners and ask them if they're still voting for Trump.
Well, it may be the fact that the only people still eating in diners right now are in fact Trump voters. That may be. Maybe that's not their fault.
Else is not going to go for it.
Yeah, if you go interviewing people who are dining in at restaurants, pretty likely you're going to find some Trump supporters there.
Right. Stu Rothenberg with good advice. Watch the key 2016 numbers as you watch 2020 polls. The size of the white electorate, college education, and geography. White voters went for Donald Trump by 20 points 4 years ago, 57 to 37%. That's why we keep saying 40. Biden gets 40% of the white vote, he's going to win the election. It's got nothing to do with having to get a majority of white voters. Democrats don't get the majority of white voters. The Republicans are the white supremacist party. What you want is you want to get a solid chunk of them. They also accounted for 71% of the exit poll respondents. So exit polls aren't perfect. Stu says that in the article, but they give you a thumbnail. They're not that far off. So if you're talking about white voters being 70%, 71% of the exit poll respondents, that's why all of these stories, all these reporters themselves who happen to be, and everything else is saying, okay, well, let's pay attention to white voters. It's not that black voters and voters of color and other people don't count, and Latinos, and et cetera, et cetera. It's that white voters are still the majority of the electorate, and that's why everything is centered around them. So everything is done through a white guy lens, which is terribly distressing, but hardly surprising, and definitely not new.
That's certainly true.
You just have to fight through to actually find out what's going on. Okay, so if the electorate is less white than it was 4 years ago, or if Trump falls well below his 20-point margin among whites, he's in deep trouble.
Yes.
Yes, he can improve his showing among blacks. He got 8% back them in 2016.
So
Latinos, 28%. So 8%. So that would mean 92%, didn't back him. And Latinos, 28%. That means that 72% didn't back him. So that's why people say 40, 70, 90. That's the key. What does that mean? It means 40% of whites, 70% of Latinos, and 90% of blacks. You get that, you win. Okay. So those are the numbers you look for when you look at the breakdown of what the individual polls show.
Okay.
Right? Here's one from Michael Mann. Joe Biden tops Donald Trump in TV viewership for the first night of convention. We don't know the second night yet. But the first night of the RNC drew 15.8 million viewers across 6 networks, a significant fall-off from the 18.7 million who tuned into the DNC's debut evening. That itself is a fall-off from the 25 or 26 million who watched in 2016. But people watch online and stream it now.
Yeah, true.
So this is at least an apples-to-apples comparison. RNC versus DNC, Nielsen ratings only. RNC doing worse.
Yeah. I
well,
wonder.
we're all online. We're all on C-SPAN,
Maybe.
they told me on Twitter.
Oh.
Okay, good. Fine.
That could be the case.
We're all on OANN. We're watching it there. Great. They said that.
Wonder.
I mean, I got these comments. Fine.
Yeah,
it doesn't
probably
matter.
True.
If you add them all together, it's still a relatively small numbers of Americans who are watching.
Mm-hmm.
And the big deal, like I said, is going to be the soundbite little pieces of it later. And what happens from this point onward, not what happens during convention week. So we know, and this is how they're designed. They are television shows designed to hit emotional buttons. And DNC week is fun, and RNC week is really depressing. That's always the case for us.
Yeah.
And you have to get past that, and that includes today and tomorrow, and then wait for the polls and see what's going on. And that's really the only way you can assess the totality, if you will, of all of it. But the RNC convention is going to continue to be fractured. This piece doesn't make sense. That piece was interesting. None of it matters. What matters is what happens in the next 2 months. And again, you still have analysts who are trying to say, well, now that the pandemic is over, let's get back to the usual horse race analysis. Well, the pandemic isn't over. Every college that opens winds up closing. It's still an ongoing story. And there are places like North Carolina where the numbers are going up and not down. So, no, the pandemic isn't over, even though that's going to be a theme of the convention. We handled it. And that's why they had the emergency authorization use that really kind of fell flat with the convalescent plasma the day before the convention. We're still waiting for him to declare that we have a vaccine when we don't. But again, the scientists are really pushing back against the FDA and their politicization of all of this. So I don't think it's going to have the impact that they planned it to have.
Well, I guess for that we wait and see.
We have to wait and see for all of it.
Wondering about the viewership of the conventions. I was wondering. I mean, I guess it's been some time since we've had 2 candidates who were both already such well-known quantities, and there's maybe a little bit on the margins, less interest in tuning in to find out, give me the life story of this candidate. We know these guys both already for a long time. One of the biographies is fake, but we know it. So that might be
and then the whole idea that, okay, everything we learned in the last 3.5 years doesn't matter because I just saw something that was interesting for 15 minutes is one of the most shallow and pervasive news media analysis pieces we have. I don't understand how those folks still have jobs.
Right. Well, the Spanish Inquisition, horrible, but the pageantry, really. The
optics of it were really colorful.
Right. It's a very clear message from the Inquisition. Exactly. Plenty. And if there wasn't enough, they took some from the people they were interrogating.
So very, very colorful. Tom Bonnier from, I forget, where is he from? Catalyst, I think?
France, obviously.
Target Smart.
Okay.
Sorry, Target Smart. Is doing the vote analysis. He's just doing Ohio with 143,398 requests based on model partisanship. 63% are from Democratic voters, 30% GOP, 6% independents, women, 58% of all vote by mail requests. He's done, and the thing that sparked my interest in his tweets is yesterday he said 1.3 million mail ballot requests have been submitted for Pennsylvania, 67.9 from Democrats, 26% from the GOP. 194,266 of those voters didn't vote in 2016. These new voters skew young, 39% or less than 35 years old, and Democrat, and 2 out of 3 of the new voters are also Democrats. And you can see the same thing in North Carolina, only even bigger. Now, it might be a shift from the day of voting to vote by mail for Democrats. We don't know. They aren't votes. They're requests for ballot. But all pretty impressive numbers.
Okay. Well, we'll see where those ballots end up, or whether they reach them in the mail, or whether kids at college request their ballots and they show up, but they've been sent home. We'll see how all of this works out. We got to think about that. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Jumping right back into the news mix, I will give us this breaking news alert actually from yesterday, so it's already broken, I guess. So we'll see if we can put it back together. Sturgis Motorcycle Rally now linked to more than 100 COVID-19 infections in at least 8 states. I think that qualifies as super spreader.
Well, again, the whole idea that the pandemic is over and we don't have to worry about it is just wrong. It's just flat out wrong.
Yeah, I don't know why I know why people say it. It's crazy. And also another milestone, I guess, to note, just again where we are. Once again, tracking the equivalent, the number of deaths in COVID-19, officially at least attributed to COVID-19, now reaching the point where it's the equivalent of wiping out the entire population of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I believe we've all heard of that one, and probably an important location for Trump voters. But imagine them, all of them, every single one of them, 182,400 plus, dead from coronavirus. And I guess if you wait long enough, you won't have to imagine it.
Now, here's more data on my point about the emergency authorization and fake vaccine stuff that Trump does not working. This is Axios. Ipsos poll came out yesterday. The Biden-Trump trust gulf. Who do you trust to provide you with accurate information about coronavirus and COVID-19? Joe Biden, 46. Donald Trump, 31. Independents, 43-27 favor Biden. And so with so much less trust, it's not like Trump can say, oh, look at this. I'm touting this thing I'm selling. I'm a known con man who sold Trump steaks and Trump you, but I want you to believe me. That doesn't automatically work. And to bolster the point we were making about mail-in votes, this is new data from Mike McDonald, who is the voter guru who follows how many people vote and so on and so forth. National statistics, mail ballot requests by party registration, to illustrate some of the points we were making. Democrats 44.8% nationally, Republicans 29%. This is from reported votes, a reported request that he can gather from all of the states. And no party affiliation 25%. In many states, there's a no party affiliation or NPA, what you might call independents. But NPA votes can be really significant. In Connecticut, for example, the independents outnumber both Democrats and Republicans. Now, mail ballot requests by race and ethnicity. Non-Hispanic white requests for ballots, 69.9%. Remember, 70% of the electorate. Non-Hispanic black, 20%. Hispanic, 1.7%. Non-Hispanic Asian American, 2.0%. Non-Hispanic Native American, 0.3%. Other or unknown or multiple, 5.8%. So pick a state. Let's do Florida. Mail ballot requests by party registration. Democrats 47.5%, Republicans 32%. This is a heavily Republican vote by mail state. No party affiliation 19%. So again, in just about all the states that you look at, and North Carolina, of course, was my favorite because they had just astronomical numbers, 10 to 15 times the normal rate here. Mail ballot requests by party registration, Democrats 52%, Republicans 15%, no party affiliation 31%, and so on and so forth. They only have South Carolina, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Illinois, Florida, Colorado. That's the only states that they have. But it's a pattern that you can see, and it's pretty much repeated everywhere. So that's kind of the statistics underlying the election. That's certainly going to be more important than a day or two of pageantry on TV.
Okay. Yeah, I would think so.
Right. Here's another point. Adam Jentelson makes this point. The media is discovering that a huge portion of the population doesn't mind and actively supports the rise of American fascism. It's the biggest story many of them will ever cover, but many still do not realize that they are covering it, and then they struggle to capture it. Okay, and that goes back, I think, from Political Playbook today. Here's something to think about. Of course, much of this is improper, and according to most every straight-faced expert, it's a violation of the Hatch Act. It's incumbent upon the news media to point this out, but do you think a single person outside the Beltway gives a hoot?
Oh. That's difficult to
because, optics
imagine.
And what only matters is whether or not you win because it's a Washington-based publication centered on who's ahead and horse race. And, yeah, it drives you nuts, but that's your basic political reporting.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's entirely true. That's what are you going to do about it? I guess you could stop reading Politico and just rely on Greg to tell you what's happening there. But... You could take a look for yourself and critique it, certainly. That's true. I mean, for most people, they probably don't understand the Hatch Act. And Trump voters, I don't know, if you value talking to them at all and finding out what it is, they are a mix between I've never heard of the Hatch Act to because I've never heard of it, it must not be very important and who cares. What's the difference between the Hatch Act and the Logan Act, and which season of Game of Thrones was that? I don't even remember anymore. Look, the guy wanted to make a speech on television, and every president makes speeches on television. I've never heard of anybody tell me why it matters where the speech is given. We all know the guy is president. Which I guess possibly speaks to the question about whether or not there really is any effectiveness to using symbolism like the setting of the White House to give a speech. I mean, I imagine that there are as many people out there who don't know about or care about the Hatch Act as there are people who don't know, care, or register in any way where the speech is given anyway. So maybe it's a wash in that respect, but nation of laws and whatnot. Yada, yada.
And again, because it's and this may not continue beyond this week, but because it's Republican National Convention week, there's no question that the media is going to be tilted towards Republicans. That's what happens during the convention. Sometimes it's incredibly annoying. There's a new Chains Research poll pretty lousy pollster. It's one CNBC uses. And here's Jonathan Lamar's write-up. In this poll, Trump closes the gap in battleground states. Wait, let me finish before you panic. Arizona, Biden 49, Trump 47. Florida, Biden 49, Trump 46. These are all battleground states, remember. Michigan, Biden 50, Trump 44. North Carolina, Biden 48, Trump 47. Pennsylvania, Biden 49, Trump 46. Wisconsin, Biden 49, Trump 44.
You
look at that and say, that looks about okay. I mean, that's about where everybody thought it was. Maybe a little tighter, maybe not.
Right.
Aaron Astor points out after that tweet, look, this poll doesn't show closing gap at all. You have to compare it to the recent poll from the same pollster. Okay. August 7 to 9, the national lead for Biden in this poll was 50-44, or a plus 6. August 21 to 23, 51-43, plus 8 for Biden nationally. Okay. Arizona was plus 1 for Biden, now plus 2. Florida was plus 6, now plus 3. Okay, that one's tightening a little within the margin of error. Michigan was plus 5, now plus 6. North Carolina was minus 1, now plus 1 for Biden. Pennsylvania was plus 4, now plus 3. Wisconsin was plus 4, now plus 5.
So tightening.
Because what?
Yeah.
Now, if you go and you look at the poll, what they say is that in this poll, again, not a very good one, the public, as of this is August 21 through 23, so it's really before the Republican National Convention, isn't as fearful of the pandemic as they were, and Trump's favorables tick up a point or two. Okay, again, within the margin of error of a poll. Margin of error is important. If somebody goes from 5 to 4 or 5 to 6, it doesn't mean things have changed, especially when you're talking about this is only one single poll. But just within the poll itself, it's basically unchanged from what it was.
Yes,
so, but tighten. Everybody knows the polls will tighten, so let's look for tightening.
I guess, but then what you brought up, I mean, doesn't even illustrate that. Even if you ignore the margin of error admonition, but they're heading the opposite direction. Well, the point really is they're tight now, and I wasn't looking before. Oh,
right.
Well,
or it's going to tighten because I said so. So let's just take it, out of context. So again, reporting. Do the reporting properly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. The reporter's job in that case was, if they needed to do a tightening narrative, they needed to explain, despite the fact that the numbers are headed in the opposite direction, I still feel like that's tightening. And I mean, that would have been an entertaining story to try to read. But I guess less embarrassing is to just say, we don't know what happened before, neither do you, and we're going to erase the website that can tell you, and it's tightening.
Yep.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's what's going on. And by the way, there's a Category 4 hurricane about to hit Galveston and Houston and somewhere in between, and it should make landfall tonight. And so by tomorrow's, the wee hours of tonight, so by tomorrow's Republican convention, we'll have hurricane stuff, which is going to interfere a little bit with media coverage. But again, then you have to wait for next week to see the results of all of this in the polls. And there'll be plenty of polling next week.
All right. Except along the Gulf Coast, I
Except
guess.
in Galveston. I don't know.
Yeah, right. I don't understand. 100% of those polled didn't answer their phones.
Yeah. Well, if they're like us, that's because they won't necessarily have phones at this time. But let's hope for the best and, try to see how FEMA handles things, given the fact that FEMA money has been diverted to do all this other political garbage.
Yes. I am not sure how that will work. We will find out. And do we have a FEMA director, or are we on actings for FEMA?
Well, maybe it's an acting storm.
Yeah, right. That's a possibility I hadn't considered.
Instead of a permanent storm, Trump likes acting storms because that way,
maybe it's not even there at all. It's the Chad Wolf of storms. This storm is not even legally happening.
Right. So just to cheer you up, CNN says former Liberty University President Jerry Falwell Jr. says he'll receive $10.5 million after his resignation.
Yeah, me too.
Nice job if he can get it.
Yeah, we should all get $10.5 million after his resignation. That's great. That's good news. I'm sure he'll use it wisely.
Well, yeah, for his lawyers, for when Liberty sues him to get the money back, because apparently he was using Liberty, or the accusation is at least that he was using perhaps Liberty money funds
to
play
various nasty things. Okay. Just any of those things. All right. Well, good.
I mean, this is supposed to be
give
blackmail,
him the money,
right? That's what he's saying. He was blackmailed.
I see. Right.
Well, who paid for the blackmail money? Where'd that come from?
I don't know. Did he pay them off?
Well, I don't know. But did you have to entertain this fellow to keep him off your back? And where did that money come from? I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that's going to wind up, let's just say the concept of discovery, as long as we still have laws, is kind of interesting.
Yeah, right. Well, that stuff, I guess we still have laws for. People want those stories. So, that'll be interesting. And as $10.5 million, is that just something he says he's going to get? Or is that something that Liberty University says, yes, we will give it to you?
I don't know. Everything he says, Liberty University says something else, and then they argue about it, and then the day later they come up with the same thing. So, we'll see.
Oh, because, yesterday's story was, I didn't resign. And then today is sure, I absolutely did resign. And I'm getting $10.5 million. And I guess that might not be true, too. I don't know. Wow.
Right.
All right.
White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows on Hatch Act violations today. Nobody outside the Beltway cares.
Yes, right. Well, go outside then. Leave the Beltway.
Right, pretty much. And it's outside of the Beltway that this election will take place.
Yes.
So that's the summary for today. It's always depressing during a Republican convention. It's always depressing about how many people don't care. But there are people that do care. And they go out and vote, and apparently they're asking for ballots. And there's plenty of us. It just doesn't get covered. Take heart. It's not meant to be guarantees. Nobody can guarantee anything in this world. But the underlying stuff here really hasn't changed very much as of what we know. And we'll have to wait and see what happens next week. I just am unconvinced that somehow or other a Melania Trump speech is going to change the world.
Well, it's a secret weapon, so we're not going to know the secret until later.
Well,
it's like
I don't
invisible,
really care,
like
do
the
you?
planes. I don't know. Where does she get all this military-looking gear that she wears? We should find out. Shop the look, as Ivanka would tell us.
Right. Secondhand military surplus from Cuba.
Oh, yeah, maybe. Cuba, a big theme this week.
Kind of looked like Fidel Castro's kind of uniform.
Yeah, well, she might be a big fan.
But, Florida.
Yeah, where they love Castro. So that'll ring a bell. Okay, very good. I think, it's a crazy world out there. By the way, I don't know if I have not made this clear to you directly. I said on Tuesday that I would have to. Tomorrow is on the road day for us. It's bringing our eldest down to college, with fingers crossed that they'll stay open. I imagine this will cancel. Yeah. So we'll be doing a taped show, I hope, to finish up for Thursday. So I will talk to you next week after this is all over and we've been hurricaned.
And then we'll have some polling. By the time we hit Monday, the hurricane will have come and gone.
That's right.
It's taking a weird path. It's going straight up.
Yeah.
I think then it's making a right at Kentucky and actually comes over to us.
Yeah.
Sometime later in the week. So, I've made sure the oil in my generator is set.
Good idea.
And, you never know.
Right, so maybe we won't be back on Monday. We'll all have been hurricaned out somehow.
Yeah. We'll see. So take care, and I will talk to you next week. Good. Have a great road trip.
Umbrella. Thank you.
And I hope everything works out.
Right. I hope we're not off the air again.
I hope
picking
the place
them up
stays
later.
open.
Yeah, right. That's the fondest wish of the broadcast and podcast listeners, because if I have to miss another day to go pick them up, we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, well, it's all about you.
Yes, right. That's the way I like it.
It's your show.
There's no reason why I named it this for a reason. I didn't even name it.
Take care, and I'll talk to you Monday.
Very good. See you then, we hope, and I think it'll work out. Armando picked the name of this show, and I don't even think he would admit to picking the name of the show so much as, I don't know, you'll call it whatever, Kagro in the morning, I guess. And so we just did. That's how the name got hung on the show, by the way, in case you were wondering, why didn't they pick something more creative and interesting? The answer is we just needed a placeholder name. And we didn't even, it was so early on that we didn't even know we needed a placeholder name for the show. But Armando threw it out there. That's part of the show lore. I think he just put it in an email at one point. And so, blah, 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 when you do the Kagro in the Morning show or whatever, XYZ, will happen. And I don't know whether any of those things happen, but the name stuck nonetheless. All right. Today's roundup will include, I don't know, difficult to say. And I'm already working on recording the show for tomorrow. So we're in that awkward position where I don't want to, I can't comment on in my head. We've already discussed a couple of items that are in the queue here, but in your head we haven't, and so I have to be careful of that as I comb through things. I think I tried to quarantine those things off to the side so we wouldn't stumble onto them, but I imagine it won't work very well given the way this show tends to work. All right, let's see. A little bit more convention news, and as a matter of fact, I think I did see this in Greg's queue and we didn't get to it, and so I will take that one over. You may have seen this news. I grabbed the Washington Post's write-up of it, but I am fairly certain that I saw someone on Twitter sort of put this story together and tip the rest of us to this fact. And if I scroll long enough, maybe during one of the breaks, I will find the original tweet that I think I shared with people yesterday. But calling into question the validity of the claims of one of the convention speakers from from Monday night. Let's see. The easiest summation of it to find is, of course, this Washington Post article, but I really do think that the original credit for catching it goes to, yes, here we go, found it. I'm going to give it to Jeremy Snyder. Jeremy C. Snyder, if you're looking for him on Twitter, all one word there, but he's a professor, where I only have their Twitter names of the universities immediately available here. And let's see, doesn't want to give me it. Simon Fraser University. Canada's engaged university, it tells me. So let's see. So Simon Fraser University professor researching bioethics, public health ethics, medical crowdfunding, and theories of exploitation. That's interesting. And what an interesting area of study that actually is. And amazingly, that needs to be an area of study. So he's up in Canada. I don't know if he himself is originally Canadian, but I guess that's interesting all by itself. It takes the Canadians to closely watch American healthcare dilemmas and debacles closely and figure out what's going on. Medical crowdfunding, an area of study. It needs to be said. So Snyder put together this long email, or rather Twitter thread, which I gather was picked up on by the Washington Post reporters just based on the order in which the stories appeared. But maybe we'll read both and see whether they are in fact derived from one another. Here's Jeremy's tweet from August 24th. That would have been Monday, right? Are you a reporter or casual viewer wondering who Natalie Harp was? And she's on Twitter, by the way, as Natalie J. Harp, all one word again. If you want to try and find her and then block her because you hate her or whatever, or you think she's a liar, this will help convince you if you're on the fence. Are you a reporter or casual viewer wondering who Natalie Harp, one of tonight's, that would be Monday night's, featured convention speakers is? Then this thread is for you. It's a nice pitch. I like it. The RNC describes Ms. Harp as a Trump campaign board member, which is, of course, how she got the speaking slot, entrepreneur, which is probably not true, and a beneficiary of President Trump's 2018 Right to Try Act. Do you remember now who we're talking about? The woman who got on and gave a speech about how he had backed the Right to Try Act and that had saved her life by giving her the right to try experimental medical treatments for her cancer. Well, again, her claim was that the act allowed her to try experimental drugs to combat her cancer, and is a linked bit here showing that she is, in fact, one of the convention speakers. Her right to try story is how she initially received national attention and her connection to the Trump campaign. I guess that's how she made it as a board member of the re-election effort. After posting her story to her LinkedIn account, which I'm really still fascinated by people who make their entrees into social media through LinkedIn. I mean, I never paid much attention to LinkedIn. It just didn't really have a whole lot to offer me. But when people were saying, well, it's a Facebook for grown-ups, it started to make some sense. Well, anyway, she posted her story to her LinkedIn account, which wouldn't have been my first line approach at things, but I guess it worked for her, which included a critique of Biden's goal of curing cancer, which is so eminently critiquable. Why would you want to cure cancer? Fox News, of course, picked up the story. The Fox News story is included here. Millennial fighting rare bone cancer responds to Biden vow. What does she say, by the way? I'm just sort of curious. I'll have to click through. Law supported by Trump helped save my life. Okay. Anyway, that's the claim with which we're all familiar. Now, this presumably led to an approving tweet by noted Fox and Friends fan Donald Trump praising the story and Ms. Harp, which came on June 14th, 2019. Just a quick blurb from him. Natalie Harp, fighting stage 2 cancer and doing really well, was a great guest on Fox and Friends. Right to try, producing some truly spectacular results. Proud of Natalie. Now, Jeremy Snyder continues on this thread. A few weeks later, Ms. Harp appeared on stage with Donald Trump at a Faith and Freedom Coalition event, where Ms. Harp recounted her story and stated, "My good Samaritan, President Donald J. Trump, he saw me there and he didn't walk by, he stopped." So nice sort of biblical reference to the Good Samaritan story. In short, this is a feel-good story about the right to try and Trump's push to improve access to experimental treatments. This will undoubtedly be the topic of Ms. Harp's speech that night, Monday, and linked to the administration's push for emergency access to experimental COVID-19 treatments. And that was obvious and a good call there. The thing is, though, like much in the Trump administration, Ms. Harp's story seems to be false. In her initial description of her treatment, she states she received, quote, an FDA-approved immunotherapy drug for an unapproved use, which sounds like maybe it has something to do with the right to try, right? Except unapproved use of a approved drug is kind of a different animal. Here a link to her LinkedIn story. I'm living proof the party of healthcare is Trump's. Well, she's not proof. She repeats this language in an interview linked in this next tweet, stating, I started looking at different doctors that would treat me in that way, whichever way it was that she was trying to experiment with, as well as FDA-approved drugs for non-approved use. So she was interested in the right to try unapproved treatments, but also interested, as many people would be, in trying something that was approved for one use, but the doctor recommended perhaps it might help you with your cancer. Now, the difficulty with this, of course, is that the Federal Right to Try Act only gives access to treatments that have not been approved or licensed by the FDA for any use, which is an awfully dangerous kind of thing to do, but I understand the interest in it. Now, instead, as she describes it, she received off-label access to an approved drug, something that long predates right to try. Moreover, he says, Ms. Harp was blaming the Obama administration somehow for her illness and thanking the Trump administration without evoking right to try in March of 2018, 2 months before the federal right to try law was signed. And here's a little YouTube video. I was a forgotten American, but I'm not anymore. Similarly, 2 months before right to try, she explicitly thanks Donald Trump for saving her life by speeding up the drug approval process. And her tweet at that point is embedded here. She's saying, thank you. Just so you know, President Trump is setting records in speeding up the drug approval process. The chemo I'm on now wasn't approved 5 years ago, so I quite literally owe him my life. Except she really doesn't. So maybe she misspoke about whether the drug she received was, in fact, FDA approved, or misunderstands the right to try law and her use of it, or just got carried away in her enthusiasm for the Trump administration. And that's easy to have happen.
Enthusiasm.
Everyone knows that. The excuse might work for the first press blitz, but not for tonight. That was Monday night. I wrote a piece last year, flagging her case. Here it is in the Washington Post. Piece entitled, Trump brags that he's helping patients access medical miracles. He isn't. And then evidence, subheader here, evidence that right to try has improved patients' lives is basically non-existent. So he was well aware of this a long time ago. During fact-checking for it, that article, he worked with Chris Shea, an assistant editor at the Post, and the two of them reached out extensively to folks at the White House and directly to Ms. Harp to confirm these facts. They didn't respond, but they can't claim that they don't know about these questions and inconsistencies. Tonight, that being Monday night, they will willfully go on, doubtless presenting right to try as an enormous policy and personal success, but with the facts as they are publicly available, that's just not true. And let's see, another tweet here pointing to Fox reporter Daniela Gino. Daniela Gino is the Twitter name of Daniela Genovese. Anyway, so she states, after Trump signed the legislation into law, she, Ms. Harp, was allowed to explore experimental treatment opportunities as well as find new doctors and medications. As I've shown, this isn't true. I hope this piece for Fox News, which is included in the tweet, is corrected. I just really don't think that it was, or that it stands any chance of being corrected, of course. But anyway, that has now led to coverage in the Washington Post. Natalie Harp said Trump saved her life. Experts doubt that's true. This is a piece by William Wan, not mentioned in the development of the piece earlier with Jeremy Snyder. But I think that it probably made its way into the pages of the Post thanks largely to widespread sharing of Snyder's Twitter thread. I think that sums it up. Anyway, we all get the story, so I'm glad to have it from that source. Interesting. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. So, yeah, it's pretty interesting. That whole thread was interesting, and I'm scanning through the current Washington Post story, and they do, in fact, make mention down here, a little bit lower in the story than I would have hoped, of Jeremy Snyder's, if not of his tweet thread, and I don't think that that's necessarily what they're pointing at, but they are pointing to his essay in the Washington Post from last year, and that stands to reason, and I guess that's probably the more comfortable of the routes they can take to acknowledging his work. Not that they saw it on Twitter, because that makes them look like reporters just sit around and watch Twitter and then write up what they see there. But I think they sometimes do that. But this way they can pat themselves on the back for having featured his article a year ago. But at least there's some acknowledgement of it here. And it may in fact be the case that, who knows, maybe William Wan read that article last year and was duly informed by Snyder's exposition of the problem and just remembered it, and then saw Natalie Harp and said, I ought to write about this because this is an outrage. Or even if it doesn't rise to level for an outrage for him, certainly an intriguing story. A couple of extra details in this, I suppose. One of the, maybe more interesting aspects of it. Remember, she used LinkedIn to disseminate her story the first time around. And if you went and read it there, you might be tempted, since it was LinkedIn, to review her resume, as it were, online. And I haven't done that, but I know that you would find this bit of information that I happen to find in this article if you checked out the LinkedIn link. Just for the record, Liberty University graduate. So that explains an awful lot, I think, including I guess, the weird kind of magical thinking that leads you to conclude that your fight against cancer, which is being waged by medical and scientific professionals, is indeed, in fact, the work of the magical Donald J. Trump, or Donald J. President, as he's sometimes referred to, Donald John President, as he's sometimes referred to by delegates to the Republican National Convention, which is not the worst of the gaffes you can make. But I guess that explains a lot of her willingness to attribute it to Trump, as opposed to, let's say, who I haven't seen mentioned so far in any of this story, and this might not be the place to look for it, but maybe in her larger discussion of things on LinkedIn at some point, she might mention the doctor who gave her the treatment, or the scientists and or doctors who developed the treatment. But instead, it seems to be all about Trump. So, okay, that probably tells you a little something too. Anyway, whole thing falls apart on closer examination. So, should be no surprise to you. By the way, yeah, I don't know who the delegate was who made that slip, but I just saw somebody sharing that thing yesterday, and I guess now that means I got to go look around to see if I can dig up that tweet. But somebody was just basically tweeting it around saying, I can't stop obsessing and watching this guy do this. Some poor guy, during the roll call of the states, I think he was from Ohio maybe, so he was casting Ohio's votes for the nomination in the roll call of the states, that boring thing that they were all doing, standing in front of that printed background. And he really wound up on it too. And he introduced himself, said who he was, and that he was the son of, I guess, some prominent Republican in Ohio. And it might have meant something to them, but it meant nothing to me. But after, personally identifying himself with this and making such a big deal out of it, he then says, and I proudly cast Ohio's X number of votes for Donald John President. I kind of felt bad for the guy blowing his big moment like that. But, there are worse things you could call him. I mean, if it said Donald John Pussbag, and then people would have been, angry about that. But President, my name is President, President is my last name, not my middle name, but my last name. I think they were probably okay with that. I don't know. I thought that was funny, and I guess maybe we can all, I don't know. It's the only way you can get me to call him President is to refer to him as Donald John President. All right. Many other stories to get to. Let's see. Greg also mentioned, and I think this deserves a little bit more exposition. I'll borrow here from one of last night's top diaries on it. I happen to pick this one up here. Look, and is there a Twitter profile too that goes with it? Mokurai. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name correctly or not. Mokurai, over at Daily Kos, writing this diary that caught my eye about the one convention speaker that they decided at the last minute, because everything here is last minute, was too embarrassing to allow to speak at the Republican National Convention, which is an amazing accomplishment to have achieved, really, just to clear the bar like that. So written on a breaking basis, I guess, last night, breaking: Republican speaker booted from convention for boosting QAnon, as you might expect to be the case, and the old trope anti-Semitic tract, Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And I guess note to self here too, that's a second appearance in the news for the protocols in the last week or so. It was inexplicably, for whatever reason, a link to a PDF of the old Protocols of the Elders of Zion was tweeted out by the FBI, the actual FBI's official Twitter account, for whatever reason. And I don't really know why they keep a archived copy of the, I mean, I can understand why the FBI would keep them, why they keep a PDF for public consumption and then tweet about it and promote the fact that the FBI archives the thing. I have no idea, but I'm sure all the QAnon people take it as a sign from Q. By the way, some developments on the Q thing is sort of percolating up. Twitter rumors that our Twitter and online sleuths are pursuing the theory that I can't remember the guy's name, but you can look it up. We've discussed him in the past. But the founder of 8chan, remember when you're too disgusting for 4chan and you get banned, you go to 8chan. This guy who started it is now rumored by some of the internet sleuths trying to crack this mystery as the person who poses as Q in this QAnon conspiracy. Whether or not it's true isn't even agreed upon by the internet sleuths trying to figure it out, but apparently they say they have some strong leads on that, and it makes sense. It stands to reason and is consistent with my own theory. I'm not trying to sleuth this out, but just following the story, the conclusion I'm kind of quickly coming to is that, the whole thing was meant as now, if it started on 4chan, I have more of a feeling like it started as a joke / hoax. Like, what's the dumbest thing that we can possibly make people believe? Whereas if it starts on 8chan, I feel like, though they probably were getting a big kick out of it, true, they seem crazier even than 4chan, and there's some chance that they might believe this sort of thing themselves. But I don't know. Anyway, the story here is about a person getting kicked out of the Republican convention for their belief in both QAnon and the protocols of the elders of Zion. Breaking, as they say here, with triggers, which is a good point because I sometimes forget to acknowledge such things. Triggers is not really a part of my thinking. I'm going to have to work harder to get that integrated into our regular discussion of things and learn what sorts of things you actually need triggers for. I'm not that, attuned to this sort of thing. But I had a reminder just the other day of one of the stories that we brought up that I wouldn't have thought to give a trigger warning on, perhaps required one. And here, sometimes in hindsight, I look at them and I say, that's a dumb one. I don't need to warn people about that one. This one made sense. I won't, go into the details. I thought it was a valid one. So we'll just borrow these triggers. What are the warnings? I don't know. I'm not sure which one it is, but I guess it's about conspiracy theory and anti-Semitism. Here's the story. RN speaker Marianne Mendoza canceled, in every sense, after boosting QAnon conspiracy theory about Jewish plot to enslave the world. Sounds fun, and I'm still waiting on enslaving the world. It's going to be fun. I just think it's a long time in coming. Yes, this is about the infamous mother of all modern conspiracy theories, the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, a Tsarist, a Russian Tsarist forgery. So I guess there's some Russian history and heritage, as they would say, if they were, in fact, Southern Americans rather than Northern Russians. So let's see. The source they're using here, the Daily Beast, told them, or our diarist here, Mokurai, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, that last night, 15 minutes ago, Marianne Mendoza, the Angel Mom. Remember the Angel parents? These are propaganda players for the Republicans whose claim to grim fame is that they had family members killed by people, by undocumented immigrants in the United States, and that they think, well, if we'd only been enforcing our laws, like the laws against murder or whatever, no, not those, but the immigration laws, then the perpetrators of these murders would never have been in the United States in the first place, and someone else would have had to murder my family member or whatever. I'm not sure what their theory is, but it makes sense to Republicans. Anyway, they call that, so that because their family members are dead, presumably, well, they are dead, but I'm presuming that the reason that they call them angel moms or angel parents is that they're dead, and you know what the mythology of death leads us to believe about the state people enter into after death. The angels are the dead people, not the parents. But if you made that mistake and thought that maybe mom was angelic, you can put that aside, because Marianne Mendoza is no angel, as they say, when we find out later on that they're dead. Anyway, she was set to speak on Tuesday night, but then she took to Twitter, for whatever reason, to encourage followers to read a thread about the Rothschilds. So we know we're going down the anti-Semitic path already. Angel mom Marianne Mendoza posts anti-Semitic QAnon conspiracy ahead of her RNC speech, according to the reporting over at The Independent from the UK. I don't know whether I doubt that they're wrongly attributing the protocols of the Elders of Zion to QAnon, but whatever the connection between QAnon's own anti-Semitic thinking it may be and the protocols, I guess, is the conspiracy she had in mind. Republican National Convention speaker apologizes and deletes message 12 hours after telling supporters to read paranoid anti-Semitic hoaxes. Terrific. And then a couple other clips from around the media universe. 40 minutes ago, an angel mom on Donald Trump's campaign advisory board had instructed her Twitter followers to read a series of anti-Semitic QAnon messages hours before she was set to appear on the second primetime portion of the Republican National Convention. QAnon has revived the ancient blood libel in QAnon, an invitation to the Great Awakening, but this time accusing Democrats generally of trafficking and eating children. So, okay, we already know that that's the case. I guess Mokurai doesn't make any further inquiry into it, but this will lead you. I'll include the post for you as a good link to the reporting of the Daily Beast, the Independent, and others on what actually happened there. But that summarizes it pretty well. So that's why you didn't see Marianne Mendoza yesterday. And who knows, maybe they'll pretend that she's been rehabilitated enough for her to make it onto tonight's program. All right, let's see. A couple of other stories. We should probably read the reporting of the Washington Post on what's going on out in Kenosha so that we are up to date and got that on the record, and it's not just bits and pieces. 2 dead and 1 wounded in Kenosha shootings during Jacob Blake protests. Mark Guarino and Jacqueline Peiser, P-E-I-S-E-R, call us up and tell us how we pronounce that, Jacqueline. We'll get it right next time. I'll probably forget. Here's the actual story. 2 people were killed and 1 seriously wounded by gunfire late Tuesday at a protest over the police shooting of Jacob Blake Jr., the Kenosha police said early Wednesday. The shootings came after a confrontation between protesters and armed men who said that they were protecting a gas station, the New York Times reported. I don't know how much protection it needed, but they were there. Kenosha County Sheriff David Beth, who, by the way, is revealing himself to be a piece of work all on his own, told the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel that police are searching for a man seen in a video holding a long gun, by all accounts an AR-15. I feel very confident we'll have him in a very short time, Beth said, and I'm not sure whether he means under arrest or recruited to the force. Shots were fired around 11:45 p.m. Tuesday, police said. After the first shots, a young white man carrying a rifle began running north on Sheridan Road, away from a crowd of protesters. Video shows the armed man fall to the ground and then fire multiple rounds into the crowd. 2 more people fell to the ground, 1 shot in the arm and the other shot in the chest, the Journal-Sentinel reported. Another graphic video shows a man with blood running down the back of his neck and bystanders shouting that he has been shot in the head. Carol Badoni from Burlington, Wisconsin, started CPR on 1 wounded man. His girlfriend said his name is Ben. guess some sketchy details at the time this was put together, just giving us anything they could find. He definitely was not breathing, said Badoni, 50. His eyes were rolled back in his head. There was no pulse. That does not sound good. Badoni added, I never run toward trouble, but it's worth getting shot for somebody else. Police soon took Ben to a nearby hospital. Kenosha police have not identified any of the shooting victims. Beth told the Times that investigators are looking into the armed men in front of the gas station who were recorded before the shooting arguing with protesters. One of the men told the Washington Post that he was there to stop people from breaking into local businesses, noting that he had seen rumors online about pipe bombs being used. Well, like most of the rumors online about what's been going on in the Black Lives Matter movement and in their protests, it turns out to be overhyped and untrue and designed to trigger over-the-top threats of violence from the readers. If the cops aren't going to stop them from throwing pipe bombs on innocent civilians, which, of course, the cops weren't going to stop them from doing that because no one was doing that, somebody has to. Except they don't, because that wasn't happening. So if cops aren't going to stop people from not throwing non-existent pipe bombs on innocent civilians, nobody has to, because it's all non-existent. But this guy has it backwards. And not only that, he was armed, and it says helpfully, in a red checkered shirt, though he declined to give his name, so at least you know how he was dressed. There's no indication, of course, they add right here, parenthetically, but it's right here in the text, there is no indication that any pipe bombs were involved in Tuesday's unrest, or any of the day's unrest, except, by the way, when they're manufactured by these right-wing vigilantes. These are the guys who you catch with pipe bombs. Kenosha has been beset by violence, looting, and fires since Sunday when Blake, a 29-year-old black man, was shot several times in the back by Kenosha police as he stepped into a car with his children inside. Earlier on Tuesday, Blake's family said he's paralyzed and still in critical condition, while his mother pleaded for peaceful protests. But the family also chastised police, saying they systematically brutalized black people. They shot my son 7 times, said Jacob Blake Sr., his father. 7 times, like he didn't matter. But my son matters. He's a human being and he matters. From the start of Tuesday's protests, armed civilians were evident in the crowd, bearing handguns, AR-15 style rifles, knives, and military flak jackets. In interviews, they declined to give their full names. Like some others, Dennis from Racine, Wisconsin, said he showed up with his pistol to protect himself and other protesters. Nothing is going to change, he said, hanging back from the crowd. This is all for nothing. Another man brandishing a handgun showed up after a call on Facebook to protect the city. Ain't nothing being done. We're the only ones, said Joe, 29, a U.S. Marine veteran. This is nonsense, he said, scanning the crowd, adding that others like him were around Kenosha Tuesday night. 3,000 of us are armed and ready, he said. And how would they know that? By lying to one another on Facebook about how many of them are armed and ready and what they were armed against. After multiple buildings burned and stores were looted on Monday, police on Tuesday night made it harder for people to enter Kenosha. And by the way, the rumor of the shooter was some people were passing around. Don't know whether we can verify that or not. And they think they have a pretty good lock on who he is because he's pretty prominent in the video. Might not even be from Wisconsin at all, but we'll find out. In downtown Kenosha, however, the only law enforcement presence was once again around the Kenosha County Courthouse, where an 8-foot-high fence was erected around the building. About 1,000 protesters gathered outside the barrier, and besides occasional chanting, the scene was quiet at first. A lot of fear in the air because of threats to protesters, said Nathan, 28, a Kenosha resident who declined to give his last name. It's hard to see now, but it will be a positive thing, he said of the protests. It'll bring Kenosha back together. Kenosha has always been a resilient place. It'll continue to happen. I can't really even tell sometimes what these people think is going on and what side they might be taking from some of these comments. After some protesters began vigorously shaking the fence and setting off fireworks aimed at officers on the other side, Kenosha County police officers atop the courthouse shot tear gas pellets and rubber bullets into the crowd. One of their favorite things to do. Around 9:20 p.m., a military vehicle entered the park, dispersing more tear gas. Really dispensing, but okay. Protesters shot fireworks both on the ground and into the courthouse steps. By 10 p.m., after pushing protesters away from the fence, about 70 police officers in riot gear formed a line across the park outside the courthouse as clouds of tear gas continued to drift toward the crowd. Police pushed protesters to Sheridan Road after 11 p.m., where law enforcement and armored trucks blocked the street. Nearby, the confrontation brewed with armed men at the gas station. Within an hour, the street exploded into chaos and bloodshed as the gunshots rang out. Beth, the sheriff, thank you for reminding us, told the Journal Sentinel that armed militia members have been on the streets in recent nights, calling them a vigilante group, which at least is true. After the shooting, he told the Times that the bloodshed validated his concerns about armed civilians. I've had people saying, why don't you deputize citizens? He said. Well, this is why you don't deputize citizens with guns to protect Kenosha. And that a better and more balanced sounding point than Beth is quoted as sharing with others elsewhere. I guess the previous statements by the sheriff are a little more questionable. I wonder if you've seen some of them circulating as I have on Twitter over the last couple of hours. We'll make a note to myself about trying to find those comments and share them with you so that you can get a better idea about why people were worried about it. I guess he was making some, I don't know when the comments are from or in what context, but the comments were such that it really didn't matter very much. They were worrisome. Basically, some troubling, we'll call them racially tinged comments because they're not outright racist. He didn't actually come straight out and say, yes, this or that group of people is not entitled to equal protection of the law, but it comes right up to the line. And I guess he was complaining about why they didn't lock up habitual criminals and people, I think as I recall the statements, who, and wink wink, who is he talking about, who were having, I guess, in his opinion, too many children out of wedlock. So I don't think he was just thinking about rounding up all single people or Bristol Palin or anything like that. I think he had a very specific segment of the population in Kenosha in mind, and not the Palins. But, maybe I'm wrong about that. He might have a broader mind than we think. We'll give him a chance, shall we? No. Anyway, we'll see if we can't round up those comments for you. Now we got to parse through some of what else is here in the Twitter stream and in Pocket. Let's see. An interesting story on the COVID-19 front that I think I saw shared yesterday by the Rachel Maddow team. I've reached my free article limit, so I'll have to see if I can read it in Pocket. It's from Bloomberg. Starbucks cafes COVID outbreak spared employees who wore masks. I think you probably get the gist of the story. We'll give you a couple blurbs from it, a few paragraphs before our last break comes up. But pretty much proving what you had hoped to see proved. So validating your own theory about masks, most likely. After a woman with the coronavirus visited a Starbucks cafe north of Seoul, that would be Korea, of course, this month, more than 24 patrons tested positive days later. But the 4 mask-wearing employees escaped infection. I guess you don't have to wear a mask, like things are developing here. It's difficult to drink coffee through a mask. I think they have us there on that one. And so I guess the place where, I guess the real danger, or the real story is, even the short amount of time, maybe, I don't know whether people linger in Starbucks cafes anymore the same way they used to before the coronavirus outbreak. But in Seoul, I guess just hanging around for a few minutes and having sips of coffee with your mask off is enough to cause problems, but not if you're in the same space for even longer because you're working there with a mask on. So that's good news for the mask theorists, even though the masks are sold to us not as protection from contracting the virus, but as protection from spreading the virus to others. But they must provide at least some level of protection. Maybe they were wearing KN95 masks or just straight up good solid N95s. I don't know, but it's not. I don't think it's recounted in here what type of mask they were wearing, but that, along with the story of the hairstylists from months ago, is about as good as anecdotal evidence as you can get. Wear your mask. You don't need to be convinced. Maybe you know someone that'll work for. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. One thing that was buried down at the bottom here, one of the, original tweets discussing the story, maybe that'll actually lead me to something else, some more original reporting from it. Oh, no. Yes, but it's in Korean, so that doesn't help me much. But long story short, what happened in Starbucks here? A person sitting under an air conditioner. It's the circulation of the air again. A person sitting under an air conditioner infected 27 others with coronavirus at a Starbucks cafe in South Korea. But none of the employees who were wearing masks got the virus. So that's kind of interesting all by itself. Again, it doesn't tell me what kind of mask they were wearing. I'd like to know. That would be of some interest. But if an infected person taking their mask off and sipping their coffee and sitting under the air conditioner and circulating the air is enough to infect 27 other people in the room who were there presumably less time than the employees were, but the employees were wearing a mask, and that's the only difference. That's really great evidence for mask wearing, even evidence for protection from contracting the virus, which, even mask believers think isn't the case. And we've been trained to believe that, and there's good scientific reason for believing it. There's no real reason why you should be able to count on standard masks, cloth masks, to prevent the virus from getting from you. But it does make a certain amount of sense. Just having a barrier in front of your face is going to cut down on the viral load that you absorb that way anyway, and that might be enough to help you avoid coming down with an infection. But mask deniers keep coming back and saying, that doesn't protect you. That doesn't protect you. But apparently, it does have some value, at least here in this story. So, I don't know. Share it with anyone you like, or throw it at people you don't like and see whether you can make it stick. Okay, let's see. Other stories to share with you. And there are many, and we kind of have to jump around and, avoid the ones that I began for tomorrow's show without too much trouble. Oh, let's see. We'll stick with the South Korea theme. Some bad news on the coronavirus front from South Korea. The Hill happens to have picked up this one. South Korea recloses schools amid surging coronavirus cases. I think their idea of surging coronavirus cases is very different from ours, where we've let the virus circulate out of control for a long time. But it is discouraging news to see that they don't have it under enough control to keep the schools open there. And if South Korea, which was lauded early on for its very dynamic response to the coronavirus outbreak, can't keep schools open, I don't know how much hope there is for us. But we'll wait and see. We'll see what happens. South Korea has reclosed schools in the Seoul area anyway, amid a resurgence of the coronavirus in the metropolitan area. On Tuesday, the nation reported 280 new cases of the virus. That's like a one state report for us. It was the 12th consecutive day the country saw a triple-digit increase in virus infections, the New York Times reported. South Korean schools were initially slated to reopen in February. After the pandemic hit, they closed until May, by which point the virus appeared to be under control and schools began gradually reopening. However, Education Minister Yoo Yoon-hae, I hope I haven't mangled that too badly, announced Tuesday that the capital region, where about half of the country's 51 million people live, would need to reclose schools. Yoo sourced the new outbreak to a Seoul church that has clashed with Korean officials over virus restrictions. The whole country now under alert, and Seoul, where half of the population lives, now not able to send their kids to school because this church clashed with officials over virus restrictions. Oh well. And then Starbucks on top of that. A worshiper at Seoul's Sarangjil Church tested positive on August 12th. Since then, officials have detected 915 infections. Health officials have accused the church's pastor, the Reverend Jun Kwang-hoon, of deliberately obstructing mitigation efforts by giving contact tracers false information. Yikes. Kindergarten, elementary, middle, and high school students will begin remote learning from Wednesday through September 11th. You said, according to the Times, anyway, the only exception will be high school seniors who will continue in-person attendance to prepare for the college entry exams that take place at the end of the year. The exams are treated as a major factor for students' career prospects, and the Korean Air Force halts all flights on that day really interesting, on the day of the test to avoid noise disruptions. How do you like that? This is some important, that's some high-stakes testing right there. Oh well. Some have called for Korean officials to go even further and allow seniors to take the exam from home, online, but you said infrastructure did not exist to allow for this option without the possibility of cheating. The priority is to quickly stem the spread of transmissions and stabilize the situation, if only to hold the December 3rd National College Entrance Exams as planned without disruption, you said, according to the Times. So it's all about preserving their ability to administer that test. Very interesting. All right, well, they do take things to the limit, I guess. They take it very seriously, anyway, in Korea. Let's see. Moving on from there, I was scanning before, looking for other stories to jump to. And here's one. I guess the segue could be, since it's about masks, I happened to see this tweet the other day from Scott Gottlieb, who I think we find his stuff on Greg's list. Not Craig's list, but on Greg's list of stories every once in a while. He tweets out this Economist story, the long story short of which, and sometimes it's best just to read the tweets about it, but I'm curious to see what the article looks like. According to the Economist's reckoning, a single American wearing a mask for a day, all day long as they go about their business, is helping avoid a fall in GDP of a whopping $56.14. But of course, multiplied by several million of us, it would be very helpful. Now, also, he points out, not bad for something that can cost as little as about 75 cents for a good level 2 procedure mask, one of those prepackaged paper masks that actually turn out to be one of the most effective non-airborne N95 grade filters out there, apparently much better at protecting others and the wearer to some extent from passing the virus around, much better than the cloth face masks, but also not difficult to get, but in more limited supply than the cloth face masks. And you're still doing well to cover your face with just about anything, rather than just wandering about uncovered, as they are doing at the Republican convention and elsewhere. And so that, too, destined to become a super spreader event. Let's look at the Economist's piece on this, and looks to be a relatively short piece, so maybe we can share the whole thing and get the thinking behind it. Why the economic value of a face mask is $56.14. Interesting for economics students everywhere, including the one we're harboring in here for another day. Let's see. That's interesting. The editor is noting here, some of our COVID-19 coverage is free for readers of The Economist, but others apparently not, and I guess this is one of them. Interesting that they wouldn't share this one. The one I'm interested in, can I get it by reading it in Pocket is the next question. Let's see. Well, yeah, you can. So much for your stupid firewall, you dummies. I'm going to read your story. After a brutal first 6 months of the year, governments across the world are hoping for an economic bounce back. Rich world GDP, that's interesting. Just come right out and say it rather than, I don't know. No one says first world anymore. But rich world GDP fell by about 10% in the first half of 2020, yet much has changed since, including that more people are now wearing masks. Economists, obsessed with translating everything into GDP, wonder if more widespread face covering could help the recovery. Yes, it can. The thinking goes that masks can, in part, substitute for lockdowns. People wearing them need not be discouraged as much from using public transport. More shops and offices might be able to reopen, albeit while practicing social distancing. Calculations from Goldman Sachs, whom everyone trusts, suggest that, and it's interesting that it's described here in The Economist, it says calculations from Goldman Sachs, a bank, suggest that a 15-point blah, blah, blah. I'll read the rest of the sentence, but that's some dismissal of Goldman Sachs, a bank. Well, yeah, but... And also, do you need to tell that to the readers of The Economist? There it is. Well, Goldman Sachs, I guess, suggests that a 15% point rise in the share of the population that wears masks would reduce the daily growth of cases by about 1 percentage point. That obviates the need for lockdown measures that would otherwise subtract nearly 5% from the GDP. I don't know if that entirely obviates it, but that's the assumption they're going with. The Economist took those calculations a step further. According to our reckoning, an American wearing a mask for a day is helping prevent a fall in GDP of $56.14. Again, not bad for something that you can buy for about 50 cents a piece. I noticed that Scott Gottlieb's tweet raised the price inexplicably to 75 cents. I think he's right and they're wrong, but he didn't bother saying that he was making that as a correction. These economic benefits suggest that governments could do even more to nudge the minority of people who still forego masks. English shoppers, and remember, we're reading The Economist here, without face covering risk a fine of £100 or more. 100 to 3,200 pounds is the range. That's $130 to about $4,200. Authorities in Turkey and Tuscany have handed out free ones to citizens. Perhaps governments should do more, such as pay people to wear them. It's a very economic solution. I don't know whether that's really going to work out here, but after all, the large economic benefits of doing so have finally been unmasked. Haha, get it? Okay. So that sounds pretty interesting. I just thought, I don't know whether we absolutely will agree with their analysis, but certainly we find value in people wearing masks, and it stands to reason that there would be some bottom line benefit to the GDP. I think, like we said, it doesn't totally obviate the need for lockdowns, but I do get the sense that we're all safer and less likely to spread the virus in conducting our essential business out and about if we're covering up, and any excuse to get people to recognize the value of collective action in that way would be most welcome. All right, let's see. Other stories to share here. Are we still waiting on these documents or not? No, I guess we have some view of what they are. So I'll go ahead with this tweet thread from another hard to pronounce name, but if I watched more TV news, it would be fine. Heidi, is she Prisbilla? I hope someone else has some better idea of how that's pronounced. But you see Heidi. I see her all over Twitter, but, this stuff isn't pronounced out loud. Here's the news, though, the important part. House Oversight Chair Carolyn Maloney, this was over the weekend, revealed that she has new internal Postal Service documents showing that the delays that we've all heard about are actually far worse than previously known, and they are across the board, she said. Now, we had our hearings just the other day with Louis DeJoy, and most of our discussion of it so far has been about his disingenuousness in answering the committee and in committing to undoing the damage that he's done to the Postal Service. That is to say, he's refused to undo any of it. Occasionally, other people have stepped in to try to undo it, but he seems bent on perpetuating it. Well, anyway, let's talk about the documents here. She says, Heidi does, that the documents would be, at this point, this was back on August 22nd, that they would be available shortly to all House members. And I guess they were, because she then continues on with her tweet thread. The documents are from a presentation prepared directly for the Postmaster General last week on August 12th. They show a significant drop in service standards across the board since the beginning of July, including in first class, marketing, periodicals, and priority mail. Now remember, Heidi says, yesterday, that would have been on the 21st, Senator Peters released a Postal Service chart demonstrating this, and noting, for instance, that the dramatic delays in postal mail delivery coincide with DeJoy's appointment, not the dawn of COVID. So it can't be blamed on COVID. That's a pretty interesting point all by itself. And then a link to the documents that Maloney is referencing is available here from the House Oversight Committee. And the link is here in Heidi's tweets. Let's see, is there more to glean from this? Not really, but just wanted to make you aware of the fact that they have this treasure trove of documents here. And the key point here, that no, it wasn't COVID necessarily that did this to it. The drop in the standards of service coincides rather with the later date of DeJoy's appointment as Postmaster General. So anyway, in case you were ever having that argument with anybody, you now know where to turn for the evidence for your part. Let's see. Other stories of particular interest. Well, let's see. There's another QAnon explainer that's out there that for a couple days ago that I haven't gotten to, along with an Inside the Boogaloo piece for the New York Times, both of them rather lengthy. But let me see if I can't set those aside and get to some other stories. Let's see. One that you've likely heard, but I think we need to kind of put on the record. In case you happen to have missed it, I grabbed Garrett Graff's tweet about it, in which he says, what was the date? August 21st, that was last Friday. Today, that day, the GAO, the government, what are we calling it now these days? The Government Accountability Office. The GAO reaffirmed its decision. I think we mentioned the initial decision. Reaffirmed its decision that Chad Wolf and Ken Cuccinelli both are serving illegally atop the Department of Homeland Security. Now, DHS has appealed the decision, or had appealed the original decision, but GAO on Friday found it again to be accurate upon appeal. Garrett pointing out, there should be bigger news than it is. And, because yesterday's convention Hatch Act violation of note, one of them, was the use of the naturalization ceremony as convention footage. I understand that their excuse, by the way, for claiming that it doesn't violate the Hatch Act, that's one thing that was wrong with it, is that they actually held the ceremony earlier in the day, as normal, but videotaped it. And they videotaped it with the intention of using it later during the convention, as indeed they did. But their excuse is, well, what we did, we just videotaped it and then we distributed it normally through, we publicized it and distributed it on, say, the White House website as just documentation of an official event. And that using that footage later on somehow excuses it because it wasn't produced exclusively with the idea in mind that it would be used for political propaganda during the convention that night. Although hardly anyone believes that it wasn't filmed with that in mind, given that it was going on and given how often they have joyfully violated the Hatch Act. Anyway, another question gets raised by the fact that apparently Chad Wolf is there and presiding over the naturalization ceremony, which is ironic for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that he is illegally sitting in the position of acting Secretary of DHS. Is he legally entitled to conduct a naturalization ceremony if he's illegally in his position? And do these people, that would be the ultimate perfect Trump trolling joke, to tell these people that have been waiting for years for their citizenship that their big moment is now invalid because, and now you have to be kicked out of the country, which I'm sure he would enjoy greatly, because you weren't properly naturalized. On the other hand, he's probably this was the reason that they may have used it for the convention. In addition to its visual propaganda value, is now if Democrats and other Trump opponents insist that Wolf is illegally in his position, well, then they must mean that the naturalization ceremony was invalid, and it'll be those people protesting Wolf occupying the office illegally who are to blame for the loss of citizenship, if any, from these people naturalized in the ceremony they used last night. That's a pretty cynical way of playing it, so I imagine they have that in mind as well. Let's see. Other stories to share. On top of our continuing collection, and there are more, and I think if I scroll down a little further, we'll find some more of them. More stories that we haven't yet shared, but similar in kind to those we have shared, of public health officials resigning from office because of threats that they receive from anti-masking kooks and coronavirus deniers. And we've collected a couple such stories from around the country, but in a similar vein, I thought I would share this story. ProPublica put this one out, and I think we might have just enough time to get to the heart of it before running out of time for today. For election administrators, death threats now have become part of the job. This is a Friday piece by Jessica Huseman, Huseman. Hope I got that right. Not only the coronavirus playing into this, but voter suppression, intimidation, and false claims of voter fraud playing into all of this. In a polarized society, the subheader says here, the bureaucrats who operate the machinery of democracy are taking flack from all sides. More than 20 have resigned or retired since March 1st, thinning their ranks at a time when they are most needed. And just anecdotally, in a discussion with my neighbor the other day, we were wondering aloud, she was hearing news that there may be possibly, at a time when they needed more to be opened, fewer polling stations opened, even in our area, as they realized that the vast majority of poll workers fall into the vulnerable category, perhaps because of their advanced age. Many retirees choosing to work at the polls, worried about exposure to coronavirus and opting out of taking these assignments this time around, and that we might have some difficulty finding replacements between now and Election Day. But this is a slightly different article. Jared Deering, the director of Kentucky's Board of Elections, had little to do with Louisville, the state's largest city, having only one polling place for the June 28th primary. It was a county decision, and it made sense, did it? In-person turnout was expected to be low during the pandemic. The polling place, a convention center, offered multiple locations to cast ballots, and transportation by bus there was free. Nevertheless, as luminaries from LeBron James to U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota tweeted an outrage about the supposed disenfranchisement of Louisville voters, threats poured into Deering's office. "You're too scared to answer your phone," one man said in a voicemail message from a blocked number. "Go find a gun and kill yourself." Yowza. Probably should be trigger warning everybody about that, too. But too late for that. "Every person that didn't get to vote because of you should get to beat the crap out of you." That's really interesting. This is rather extreme. And I didn't say crap either. The man, who identified himself as a Washington, D.C. resident, expressed hope that Deering, a bigoted whore, in this guy's estimation, would be mangled in a flaming car crash. So very creative in terms of the threats. So look for an advertising copywriter or author, I think, on that one. In another voicemail, the same caller, oh, really, predicted, this is really obsessed, this guy, the same caller predicted that every member of Deering's staff, whom he called evil Fs, using the fun word for that, would be damned for eternity. "Y'all are going to hell. God sees you. He sees you committing voter suppression, and that is a mortal sin." I don't know that every denomination believes as much, but there it is. Such abuse isn't limited to Kentucky, though. Across the country, election administrators and their staffs are facing unprecedented attacks, much of it from outside their jurisdictions, from both left and right-wing voters and activists. The polarization of American politics has reached such a fever pitch that the bureaucrats who operate the machinery of democracy and largely lack the authority to change it are harassed and threatened in language that would be out of place even if they were candidates espousing extremist views, which they're not, by the way. This pressure, along with health concerns, is prompting an unusually large number of elections officials to step down, thinning the ranks of experienced administrators at a turbulent time when they are dealing with record numbers of absentee ballot applications, which in most places must be processed by hand. Deering, a Democrat who supports voting by mail during the pandemic, stayed on the job, but he was rattled. "It was disturbing," he said of the threats. "Elections are always tense, but this year is something different. There's a new and increasing level of acrimony, specifically directed at administrators." In Washoe County, Nevada, a mailed-in ballot for the state's May primary had "sealed with COVID spit" written on the outside of the envelope. That's got to be fun to get. "We took that as a threat," said Deanna Spicula. Hope I got that right. Boy, all the names today. The county's registrar of voters. The ballot was not counted, and the envelope was turned over to police. There was insufficient evidence to bring charges against the sender, and I mean, you do have to sign the thing, said Michelle Bays, chief investigator for the Washoe County District Attorney's Office. Gee whiz. in Evansville, Indiana, after an activist named Janet Reed sent out hundreds of absentee ballot applications in May that allegedly sought to deceive voters into registering as Democrats. Interesting. Recipients who assumed that she worked for the elections office began to flood its phone lines with furious accusations of malfeasance. We have received many calls at the election office irate with our staff, and they think it's our fault that this is happening. County Clerk Carla Hayden told the election board in a May meeting. They've been cursed at, they've been hung up on, all kinds of things, which is really unfortunate because they are working very, very hard and helping extra hours. And some of it has to do with trying to fix this error that someone else made. Reed, who did not respond to a request for comment, has been charged with felony election fraud. I'd be very interested in following up. There's a link here, and maybe we will take a look at that later on, about exactly who Janet Reed is. I wouldn't be surprised to find Republican provocateurs distributing such absentee ballot applications that allegedly seek to deceive voters into registering as Democrats and then point to that as Democratic election fraud. But then again, I also wouldn't be surprised to see dumb people just doing that and doing it in earnest and being caught out about it. All right. As I mentioned, no live show tomorrow. Hope to get a taped set piece together for you so as not to leave you without something fun to listen to. In the meantime, I know you've got something fun and interesting to listen to because the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes next.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waltman.
Ready for their roundup of news? Well, it includes, Propaganda Chop Shop Project Veritas filed suit in federal court to overturn an Oregon law against secretly recording others without their knowledge. That's their whole game plan. And then chopping up the tape to make it look like the target said something they never did. Good, that ought to be illegal. Very interesting. Next.